Guess what? I'm glad I have a wife next door to come in and tell me everything I just said, which was really good, was muted. Well, anyway, earworms. What are earworms? Well, they're kind of like bookworms. You know how people love books, they love reading, maybe they love stories or different topics of books, and everyone has their different genre and stuff like that, or multiple genres. They get into the design of books and all the innovations in publishing and printing over the years. Well, earworms are kind of like that, except what we're into is ears. So, well, actually, not ears, but sound. So we are basically worms that crawl out of ears and go searching across the land. And we go looking for and listening for great sounds, great music. And since I'm kind of into the electronic and electro-acoustic music, that's primarily what earworms is about. Although we explore a little bit of music concrete, and we will be taking a look at things that are kind of related, things that create great sound experiences that we could all just appreciate and love. Something for the mind, something for the heart, something for the soul. And basically what we're going to be doing in this series throughout these Sunday nights is basically exploring the music. We'll listen when we can together. We'll definitely share a bunch of links, but copyright on YouTube can be kind of tricky. So there's not a lot that we can play on YouTube if it's copyrighted, but maybe some independent artists would like to showcase some music, and so we'll play some of that and talk about it, and we'll also look at some of the innovations throughout history. In fact, tonight we'll be focusing on that. I picked a point in time, like in the latter half of the 19th century, as I think a good starting point, because I found some innovations that you don't hear a lot about, but were really important in getting the ball rolling in this new kind of music, the electronic music, or shall we say, electricity being utilized in the music making process. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce a couple earworms. First of all, I'm going to first of all, I'm going to get my face off the screen because I'm actually getting sick of looking at it. And everybody joining us is of the Avatar community. And so there we go. And plus now I can put my headphones on and put my face in this monitor and all that sorts of stuff that you don't want to see on the camera. So anyway, here we go. I'd like to introduce everybody to my esteemed co-host, Mr. Jay Goodwin.
Esteemed might be pushing it a bit, but I'll give you that. Also, I was very excited when you first started talking about how we're into ears. I thought we were going to take a divergent fetish moment, but
well,
it's very free flowing now. Yeah,
there are like ears are not the worst thing you could have a fetish about.
I mean, yeah.
So anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll introduce our final guest quickly after that.
Oh, I'm older than the dirt. In fact, I believe I mentioned on another stream that I was there when they were inventing dirt. They didn't listen to me. That's why it gets everywhere, and nobody likes it. But my experience, like in music, really overlaps the work I did with computer programming and then hardware as well. Started out in the early '80s on a VIC 20, making it beep and boop, and then trying to figure out a way to get it to make sound cycle audio fast enough to try and recreate audio. It didn't do it well, and so just kept upgrading over time. The Amiga was really where I spent a lot of time, with trackers and doing audio work, but I've always appreciated the distinct sounds that you could get from electronic instruments that just weren't achievable with with your classic analog work.
Yeah. So there's something about the Amiga. There was a lot of musicians that kind of got into it at that time, and I remember, even in the mid '90s when it was kind of like a little bit past the time of the Amiga, there were still people around that were using it in music and stuff, and some of the artists I work with were using one. So it's kind of a club, and it's also included people really into video production as well because it was one of the
Yeah, with
first
a video
really strong
toaster.
computers. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was easy to gen lock, so you could do video overlays, and then you could also do the audio. Then it was really kind of a one-stop multimedia shop, and then later you had the video toaster, which was used in a lot of professional broadcast situations, and so yeah, it had a life that certainly it lasted longer than Commodore, the company that made it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I remember those computers. They were cool. My friends had them. I had a TRS-80, which I call a Radio Shack Trash 80.
Yeah, the Trash 80.
Yeah. So, anyway, we're going to introduce our final guest now, who is an artist, actually, and hopefully in future weeks we will be able to have him on as an artist. This week he's going to be an intellectual. I'd like you all to meet the problem being.
Oh, I don't know about that. Wow, that's hard to follow up with.
What a stream so far, huh? Like, how many minutes was that of me just being muted?
Rookie error. Look, it's your first stream, yards. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take it out for I guess any time I want to do a collection for the series, but maybe leave it in. What the hell,
Come on, yeah.
Got to have the memories. So anyway, for those that don't know you, there'll be some people in the chat that do, but there'll be some that don't. How would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm the arsehole who made Ocean Man.
That was a classic.
Oh God, I did that in one night. I just couldn't stop myself. I don't know why. It was just just had to be done. But yeah, I mean, I started making music in about the year 2000, quite late, really. But I had no musical training or anything like that. So I got a £10 piece of software called I think it was called EJ.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on a disk, and I put it on my Windows computer at the time and faffed about with that. It had like a dot matrix and things like that, but you could put in your own sounds. And I didn't have a proper microphone. I had like one of those stupid computer mics stuff to record sounds and vocals in. So I'd sort of created my own things. It's very learning on the job. So I was just kind of just pushing myself to make noises and to make terrible noises and sounds and things, and then took it more and more seriously to the point that I started picking up Reason, and then later Logic on Mac, and producing music and just trying to improve myself, learn more. I ended up sort of doing music for library music through KPM, music that was used on certain TV shows and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and not being paid royalties for them for 5 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, long story. I had a band in around 2000. Was it 2005, 2006, something like that? Which didn't last very, very long, but it was fun whilst it lasted. And yeah, I mean, my musical taste really sprang from the more sort of, I've got a very eclectic taste, but I'm very much into experimental electronic music, especially sort of the industrial variety, from Coil. I'm trying to think, Coil. Early Killing Joke, stuff like that, Skinny Puppy, things like that. And yeah, I mean, it's just something I've enjoyed, sort of experimenting with different sounds and noises, and from commercial stuff through to non-commercial stuff to soundscapes and stuff. And I did go to university, the London College of Communication, which is University Arts London, where I studied sound art and design, and I left. I left because it was run by a bunch of arseholes who just never turned up.
Really?
Yeah, it was really. It was we were when I was there. It was only the second year it had been running, and it seemed to me that the professors were more into their own thing, sort of not being there. Like you turn up for a lesson, and they wouldn't even turn up. You wouldn't get told anything. It was a complete joke. And when you're paying for the pleasure, it wasn't great. And we had some great people there, when they did turn up. So, but it was very, very messy, and I just couldn't really manage it. So
Yeah, it's one of those things where I guess they were artists that really wanted to have a day job, but then,
Yeah.
you got to put some hours into that day job, and especially when you're teaching.
Well,
I've taught.
we had the guy from the Flying Lizards, lecturing us and stuff, and he
Oh,
was
really?
great. Yeah. I don't know if anyone knows the Flying Lizards, but they did that money. That's what I want.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. That was
No,
great. It was great.
no, it's always good for students to get exposed to some of these professional musicians and whatever area they're in, and actually get some real world advice and some experience through meeting them. But as far as the faculty is concerned, you got to have a little bit of division there. Like, okay, you're the guys that need to show up because these students are paying to, learn something.
Yeah, you think that might be slightly important,
Yeah. So anyway, I want to say to Jay though, if you could help me out with the chat, if there's anybody contributing into the chat that you'd like to
Oh, yeah.
mention, please let me know. I'm going to let you guys all know right now because my vision is a little bit sketchy. I have a form of macular degeneration, so seeing some of these things is not my strong suit. So anyway, well, it's great to get started here, and I think we should. Basically, this week we thought we'd take a look at some of the innovations through history, and we were talking about some of the early instruments, and then it just exploded on me once I read about Elisha Gray, and so we're going to pop up some slides here. Now, this is not a class. I've taught in higher education for 22 years, so it's kind of hard to get that completely out of me. But I decided, this is for prompting, so I keep in mind what I'd like to cover and just have a format, but there's not going to be a great amount of detail in the slides. First of all, I want to say I am not going to start at the very, very beginning. In the 1700s, the 18th century, middle of the 18th century to the late 18th century, there were already then some innovations that you could call electronic in a way, basically utilizing electromagnetic principles. Alessandro Volta, credited as the inventor of the battery, and kind of like 3/4 of the way through the century, the 1700s, they had battery power before generator, and basically it was chemistry and using chemistry to create electrical charge. And so they did have in the late 18th century some harpsichords, for example, that used electromagnets. But I was trying to find details about this, and it was kind of tough. So I thought, you know what, this might be a subject a little later on. Let's go into things like this. And now let me remember my keystrokes for going to the next slide, which, oh, yeah, there it is. All right, so the Telegraph. And I should edit something there. It's Samuel F.B. Morse. He had two middle names, apparently. And basically in 44 is when I say perfected there, but really he made it usable. It was being worked on beforehand. Morse was working on the telegraph. 44, he made it kind of like ready to go, but didn't patent it until I think it was 49. So 1844, we had the first telecommunications device, and it basically utilized sound signal, not
And
basically,
Kraftwerk made a career out of it. So.
yeah, yeah, and actually, I've been to many electroacoustic conference and things like that where on the program or some poster that's promoting the event, they have the Telegraph there. Basically what it does is it sends pulses through an electrical current, and the pulses could either be dots or dashes as we would see them on paper, but they're really just length of the pulse. And so a lot of people call them dits and das. I guess it depends on, your experience. If you're in the military, you may have different words for them. And basically they had their own kind of like coding system, like how many dits and das would make this letter or that letter. And I found out there was actually a little bit of a science to it. Like, you know how we use, like when we're talking about letters of the alphabet, we use longer words for it, like Lima, Mike, Peru, and things like that. And J is like Juliet. They basically the J for Juliet, which I don't remember what it was, but it was something that was like a da dit, and the guy described it as it sounds like Juliet being shy or something like that. It's like, okay, maybe that's a memorization technique, but they used it rhythmically, and basically when you hear a telegraph being played, I mean the interpreter at the other end needs to really have a good ear and a lot of practice with it because it's very rhythmical. You need to know when it's a space that's in between letters, so you know that whether it's a letter that is 2 DAWs in a row or 4 DAWs in a row, and not just 2 letters that are 2 DAWs in a row. You know what I mean? That you know that by just the feeling of space in the middle, and then you need to have longer spaces for when it was between words. So you have the little spaces between letters and then the longer spaces between words. It was kind of musical in a way.
Yeah, it's very, very percussive. If you know percussion, keeping the beat, keeping your rhythms correct, knowing the proper length so you didn't vary much, and then the pauses to space out. I mean,
Morse code users are probably very good drummers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're keying, you learn it pretty quick, at least as far as using your hands.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I didn't save it as one of the links for this section, but if you do a YouTube search for like Morse code translation or something like that, it's like a black and white film where a guy describes it. It was kind of like one of those promotion things for the military, I think, in like, this might be an interesting job for you, operate a telegraph. And so he was talking about it, and you could see how when listening to it, you sound like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, and it sounds quite artistic, but at the same time, it's not like you're performing it on stage. So I have a little clip here. Now, here's something that happened to me last night. I'm playing around here in StreamYard, and then I decided, okay, let me queue up my software and play some music. And I was noticing the audio wasn't coming through. And then I realized StreamYard doesn't do that. It only transfers audio that's in a web browser and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh no. And so I had to make some videos earlier today and just throw them in. So let me see if I can do this. Hopefully it'll play it and put it on screen. But here's an example of me using a software called VCV Rack that is a modular synthesis software. It models Eurorack. And it was a good way of me just kind of like showing a little bit of Morse code type of stuff. I don't know if any of the, film footage or things like that out there is copyrighted, so I decided to just make stuff. So here we go. And plus, I explained a little bit about it. Okay, so here I am in VCV Rack, and what I have set up here is basically a little MIDI input, so when I press a keyboard, it basically makes things happen. And what will happen is this little module here basically sends Morse code that you type in here. The module's made by shall we say, a group called MSC Hack. And basically I have it opening and closing an envelope, which allows through a sine wave. And basically what we hear is Morse code beeps. Sounds kind of like this. And that's it basically saying MSC Hack. Let's see what happens when we say, we want to say the name Jay. Jay. How about that? Okay, let's try and see what happens if we do J space A space Y. Now, this would not be how Morse code would be sent, but we'll hear an extra space in between. So there you can hear the three different letters J, A, and Y. Now, when sending Morse code, breaks like that are a little long. They try to be quick, and basically the interpreter and the senders are basically rhythmic artists. I might slow it down a little bit here, but basically they would send it as one word, so that way you can then have spaces to delineate other words. Let's say Jay is hungry. So that short clump in there was the word is. So here we're going to hear Jay. Okay, I'm going to cut it off there because I think I got a little too wordy with it, but you get the idea.
I was going to say,
volume
Jay's
was
got a good
high.
beat. I could really dance to it.
But anyway, that is, for anyone out there, VCV Rack is free software for Mac, PC, or Mac, Windows, and Linux. And so it's a free download, and then they just have a premium version where it can work as a VST instrument in your DAW. But there's so many modules out there that community developers make that are really cool like that. So anyone that wants to play around with it and they haven't heard of it yet, give it a shot. So does anyone want to say anything about this before we move on? I was going to segue to our next slide appearance.
No, I think the interesting thing is that the basic mechanical aspects of the Telegraph end up getting repeated time and time again in electronic music as we move forward. In the instruments that are created with the electromechanical stuff that we see. So this is a good foundation.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, did you know what the Morse code in Radioactivity by Kraftwerk says?
No, I don't.
No?
I've never done the translation.
It's actually Morse code for radioactivity is in the air for you and me, which are the lyrics.
Ah, well, there you go.
Well, then it makes sense. But yeah, we might spend a whole week on them one time.
Oh God!
But in any case, let's move on here. Now, the Telegraph communicated over a single wire, and at first, you could only have one message being sent over one wire. But our next subject, and let me see, yes, Elisha Gray. One of his early innovations was to create what's called a multiplexer. The one he created was an octoplexer, which means it allowed you to send 8 different signals simultaneously over one wire. So it was like the beginning of having, polyphony and communications at first, but this then worked when he invented an instrument that we're going to talk about in a minute. This helped him to be able to, he invented one of the earliest electronic music instruments, and it was polyphonic from the start. But in any case, so you basically had 8 different signals could be sent on cable, and the way they were separated, even though they were on the same cable, was that they were different tones. So there was some pitch detection at play there. Now, I didn't get into the weeds to see how that was done. That might be something to explore in the future. It's hard to find information that is kind of like translated to our terms today and written a way that's a little bit more easy to understand.
Yeah, probably would have just been like a
Because I think we've gotten dumber over the ages.
That is absolutely true. I've watched like Navy training films for what would have been like basic jobs in the electromechanical world, and you just sit there going, these guys, a lot of these kids they may not have graduated high school, but the expectation of their education level coming in would definitely strain a lot of second-year college students.
Today they probably think they're entitled to pass just for turning up.
I did notice that those Navy documentaries were very weak on the pronoun usage. And, so there's, you have to expect one side, but not so much the other.
Well, that's just bigotry right there.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm saying myself because I actually listened to one of Elisha Gray's books last night. It was on basically the miracles of nature. I believe that is very close to the actual title of it. But I was listening to it. He was talking about geology and the magma in the earth and basically the different layers of earth and soil, at least as far as they knew back then. But the language was just so eloquent and different that it's like, man, I need to listen to this paragraph again because I don't understand what he's saying.
Yeah, you really notice the difference. Somebody that was educated using the classics versus now
versus me. All right, and here we go in the picture. He has a violin there, and then this steel plate. And this was something that he experimented on for a bit, but he didn't really carry that specific project to fruition. It was actually trying to use a violin as a speaker, basically conducting electricity into a plate that the vibrations would then fill up the resonating chamber of the violin and, be kind of like a speaker. Although, as we'll see, he actually was the inventor of, now I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I have some historians that back me up, at least from what I've read, is that he made the first speaker. And this is not it, but this is his musical telegraph. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And this is basically an instrument that is a keyboard instrument. It actually only has 8 keys. The black ones are painted on. And it was capable of playing 8 notes, because that's what his octuplexer and so forth was about. And basically he was like in 8-note polyphony stage at that point in his life. Now he eventually did a 16-note version, but at that point it was 8. And so it's kind of like
8-bit to 16-bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what we're going to switch over to now is a website. So I'm actually going to do some sharing here. So far I've been clicking the right keys. I hope I get this. Come on, do it. There you go. No, you didn't. What the hell?
Look, God damn it.
Yeah, let's see. Where is share? Share screen. I won't be sharing screen. I will be sharing a web page. Now, this is a website that I recommend to people that are interested in electronic music. And there it is. It's called 120 Years of Electronic Music. And so you see the picture was the one we saw before, but now we're on a website. And it's basically free, and you could do a lot of reading. Keep it kind of short, precise, to the point, and then have some images to kind of like illustrate the concepts pretty well. I decided rather than me just copying all the slides and putting them in StreamYard, we could just switch over here. So this is a schematic. This is actually one of the images that was with the patent. He patented this in 1877, 2 years after he had really invented it, and that was 1874. And that was also a pretty auspicious year. And I think, Jay, you probably want to jump in on this a little bit. There was something called Invention Wars, Attack of the Phones, and that was in 1874, February 14th. And that is when Elisha Gray and Alexander Graham Bell both submitted patents for the telephone
Yep.
on the same day. It's just Graham was supposedly an hour and a half earlier, but there's been books and intrigue about all this thing, and bribery has been mentioned, and one guy even confessed to being bribed, and
Yeah.
oh my goodness. I don't know. Have you done research on that? Do you want to?
I mean, I'm aware of the controversy over who got there first and who. I mean, there was a patent clerk that later came out and said that he was bribed to delay Gray's stuff once Bell had brought his in. That Bell was actually later, but got paid to play with the timing of these things. The interesting thing though is that there's these, in all of like technological development, there are moments of synergy that kind of happen in multiple places at the same time. It's just all of the elements, all of the understanding of the fundamentals kind of hit people at the same time, and then you have the technical capability to make the device. But they're like the history of their experiments and all that. They come to it kind of from a very different mindset initially, but that they both kind of settle on a very similar solution. It's just one of those synergistic moments in history.
Yeah, but just to add a little more mystery to it, have you heard of the name Antonio Meucci?
I don't think so.
He was an Italian American who basically was working on a telephone himself, and it was like a couple decades before this. And the thing, he was just having trouble getting funding, and he wasn't able to bring it to fruition. But basically, after looking over, I mean, it took like over a century, but after looking over, researchers looking over his plans and his designs and everything, they were like, okay, this would have worked. And it looks like he kind of came up with a working model first. And in 2002, the U.S. Congress actually credited him, one of those things that Congress does that doesn't really mean anything.
We need to get the Italian vote turning out. So let's go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so they gave him credit for it, whatever.
Right.
But the thing is, I don't know. I mean, I don't. I would. Someone would spend a lifetime and do a doctoral dissertation on this. You know what I mean? And I'm just not taking the time to study one subject that hard.
Yeah, and the thing is that at that time, it wasn't enough to just fill out a paper patent and describe your invention. You actually had to bring a model and submit that with your patent, and then it went into the patent offices. Sadly, a lot of those models ended up being destroyed in a fire. In what was it, in the early 1900s, mid 1900s?
I don't know, but I know that at least this invention here, the original patent model is in the Smithsonian.
Is it? Yeah.
The electro-harmonic, well, Gray called it the electro-harmonic telegraph. A lot of us just call it the musical telegraph. But anyway, let's get back onto this. And basically the idea here is, now I'm zooming in, but I don't think you guys see the zoom, and that's probably okay because, I'm just trying to point here to the things. Like basically you would count 8 of these guys here. Those are slots where basically you have your electromagnets. And the electromagnets did one thing. There was 2 electromagnets, each opposite each other, and in the middle was a steel reed. Kind of like a saxophone reed, where it's like cut cane. Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. It was a mechanical oscillator in that it was physically being vibrated by these electromagnets. And then that created like an electrical impulse chain, basically the waveform going as signal through the cable. Right. And then it went to a speaker. And this is where I'm going to have to scroll down a little bit further here. Here we go. This is not the speaker for this device, but this is one of the speakers that Elisha Gray invented. And supposedly, according to a couple of historians, it was the first, at least saucer-shaped speakers ever invented, or the first one. And so it's like a metal dish, so to speak, and electromagnet in the middle. And it would vibrate the saucer section, and you'd basically have this almost cone-shaped vibration of the air molecules. And then we have here, the pine box is not shown in here, but there was a pine box speaker that went with this. This was like your keyboard controller, and then the cable went to the pine box speaker, where inside that, this is still the reed section, I believe, here, but inside the pine box, you had ribbons, and basically that's where he was using metal ribbons, like the ribbon microphones that we have today, but these were ribbon speakers. And basically the ribbons would vibrate in the same way that the reed did, except they would vibrate in a way that was a little bit more flexible, and it would fill the air molecules in the pine box, which looked like a little coffin, and basically it would fill it up and resonate outwards. So in February of 1874, he lost the patent wars. And by that summer, he invented this instrument. And basically, this is a good page for anyone interested to check out. And had a concert. And there was a concert. Now, there was a few concerts over the course of that year. And I think the first one was at Oberlin College, because that's where he taught. That's also where he studied for a while, although he never got his diploma. He basically went off and started inventing things rather than earning a diploma. But that's also where he met his wife, and she was a musician and probably had some influence on him in deciding, okay, you didn't invent the telephone first, but hey, here you go. You got a musical instrument, and so that was the next thing. And so, yeah, it was capable of polyphony, because basically the sound, the audio signal was basically, the vibrational pattern of all those reeds together. And so that was carried to the ribbon speakers, and, it was polyphonic. And I think the first concert was in the summer. And then by the end of the year, December 29th, they had another concert. And then there was a series of concerts, and the Steinway people got involved, and that was like in the Northeast. And so for a couple of years there was like a series of concerts. But that was the first, I guess you would say, electronic music type concert, where basically all the people were sitting in the room and all they see is a box on stage. And then they just hear stuff.
Nothing changes. We're back to that.
Yes, exactly. It's like a lot of the concerts I've been to.
The 1990s and the 1870s. Oh.
Everybody's sitting there, and there's no performer in the room. In fact, the performer was like in another city and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of it's essentially, I mean, it's not a broadcast, but it's you have a remote performance that is then being heard somewhere else. This becomes, it's like the proto invention of the music over the phone, but then radio broadcast and all that, right? These are just variations on that basic theme, where no longer were you, in order to witness a musical performance, did you have to be in the room with the performers and be limited by the sound of the instruments that they're making.
Yeah, and this is actually something that's going to lead into our next innovation. I mean, there's a lot more that could be said about Elisha Gray, and if anyone wants to say something now, go ahead. Uh, I was just thinking, I'm gonna
I've
keep
learned now.
moving along.
I've learned more now in 40 minutes than I did during my course.
Well, and
I think the thing
go
that the
ahead.
thing that you always look at from a like a technical standpoint, right, is that you work on one problem and you may or may not be successful in solving that, but there's so many other problems that rhyme with that. And so the idea of having to transmit audio over a wired line, which is what the telephone is basically about. Initially it's I'm going to have a speech or something like that, which is a very narrow frequency band. But to come up with with this musical instrument instead, this is not a huge technical leap. It's just like a reapplication of the technology that and fundamentals that he would have had to learn
It's
when
telephone
inventing that.
+8 or +7, I should say.
Yeah, I mean it's again there's all numbers of technologies that initially had an intent of one thing, and either because of technical limitations or the patent or expense or something like that, they end up shifting and becoming much more successful in another market with not ludicrous amounts of modification. And once you're familiar with the problem domain, it becomes a lot easier to then work in those adjacent
It's
domains.
about finding. I mean, when you're dealing with that level of genius, and it is genius because you're looking at problems, finding solutions uh, with technical ability, but you're also, if you're capable of that, then you're also very much capable of applying it to different applications, to finding that market that if you've been duped at the last minute in terms of patents, then you can really turn around and go, well, what else can I apply my knowledge and know-how to?
Right, and you tend to you tend to when you solve a novel problem,
Yeah.
your view of the world kind of shifts because
Hmm.
then you understand how that changes things. But once that view shifts, you see the world and the potential of using something very similar to that in other applications. So
Oh yeah, it's
it's
outside the box.
unsurprising that these
Yeah,
guys then go on and create
exactly.
all of these inventions that are just in the similar vein.
I think it's quite poetic that you take that technical know-how and make something musical with it. There's something really beautiful about that. Some inventor, who's an engineer, thinks in terms of application of music, and then from music, then you can apply that to so many different applications too. It's
Yeah, and I think there's an underlying harmony of
mm,
the physical world that when you become technically proficient, if you
mm.
also have any kind of interest or exposure to music, you see that show up, and then it's a thing that is easily translatable because I mean it's just built into the world.
Well, it makes sense because, I mean, with engineering, there comes an element, obviously, of mathematics, and music
Hmm.
is mathematical. So there is a synergy within that, I think, which resonates, ironically, with that sort of mindset. I think, as a musician and I mean, I wish to God I had the mathematics. I really do. But the engineering scope and the mathematical scope and musicality with noise and sound and electronics, it just seems to be simpatico. It just fits together in such a wonderful creative niche. And I think that's where true genius resides, in that sort of little tiny speck of
It
creation.
it's always the understand. So if you're working in the electrical world at this time, right? You're going to be where DC and AC
Mm,
they exist, but they're not used kind of in the same areas. But once you understand like AC as a means of transmitting electricity, then if you are aware of sound and music, all of a sudden you're like, wait, those are waves as well, right?
mhm.
maybe I can match these up to be able to reproduce sound using
Yeah,
electricity. And yeah, that's exactly what you can do.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I'm just putting a message in there. I have to find a way to pay attention to the chat. I don't know what's going on there.
Well,
Um,
psyche,
Yeah, Psyche
electro.
Electroacoustic was talking
well,
about
that's
a,
my wife.
yeah, well, she was
Oh,
talking about
hello.
a build kit for this, right?
Yeah, and I said it would make a great Kickstarter, and I
Yeah.
Well,
think
here's one thing. We're going to have her on one of these weeks, definitely. She is an electronic music composer, a
Bring it on.
multimedia artist, and now she makes cigar box guitars.
wow.
And
Yeah.
there's something about this, like Elisha Gray was born in, it was in Ohio called Barnesville. It was like a rural area. He grew up on a farm, and of course, with the Industrial Revolution having already started, there were some things that were mechanical in nature, and he had to kind of like improvise with that stuff. And when you're living and working on a farm, you can't just go out and buy something new in a lot of cases. So you have to like remake things or reuse things,
Repurpose.
and yeah, repurpose. That's the word. And I do basic things like that here a little bit because we actually live in North Florida, a little bit rural.
Well,
21 years I lived in Miami, and
you're compelled to be practical.
yeah.
And there is a certain amount. I have a profound respect for that because there's a pragmatism in having to sort of be forced to be resourceful, but there's also a sort of creativity that comes with that and a certain way of thinking, which I think more sort of city dwellers like myself, or former city dwellers like myself, don't have. And I think that's such a wonderful skill to have. And I'm so,
Well,
I feel almost, well, jealous, really.
no, I'm like you. I was like a city dweller. I said I lived in Miami for the past 21 years until like
Yeah.
3 years ago, and we basically moved up here to North Florida. And she makes cigar box guitars now and makes her own piezo pickups, and she also makes external preamps and things like that for them. And it's that inventiveness that comes from you're out and kind of like in the middle of nowhere, and you just feel the need to create stuff.
Well, that's it.
And
You're forced to focus, aren't you? Because
yeah,
what else are you going to do?
Yeah, you either have a lack of access to resource, or you have a time constraint, or you lack money, right? Which is
Yeah.
very much where cigar box guitars and diddly bows and all that
Yeah.
come from, right? Is poor people who want a musical instrument, but no, I can't go pay what at the time, $15 for a guitar, which was a size. I mean, there was probably, a couple of months' wages for some of the sharecroppers and things like that. So
And I
you
think
figure it out.
I think I've seen what's happened in the modern world. In an age where everything is so accessible and readily available, and because prices of things, even though they get more expensive, they also get cheaper in the sense that you can, more mass production. So you can access things very easy. You can access computers, you can access musical instruments, you can access electricity, you can access all these things. But then, because there's such a dearth of these things, the creativity just simply isn't there. That's why modern music generally is lacking musicality, lacking creativity. And I think generally it's because there's a lack of disparity. There's a lack of
Constraints. Constraints are required for
Constraints
creativity.
are, yeah, absolutely. Constraint and not having access to certain things forces you to be more creative. It's such a deeply psychological thing. And I think it's hardwired into us from thousands of years ago, I think. And I think that's where things like the spark of the Industrial Revolution and the great engineering feats of the 17th and 18th century, 19th century particularly, I think that really is what we've lost as a culture. I think because everything is so immediate and so accessible that
And I
people
think
don't
we've
enough
also
about
lost the understanding of what were initial problems that were being solved, and then like the progression of technology, right? That because look, humans have been humans for a good long time, and
Some
if
of
you
us.
think that you found a new problem, you are either misidentifying it or you just don't know enough history.
That's true.
The We solve the same problems time and again.
Mm.
The problems may come in a different suit of clothes, but underlying it is the exact same problem. And so you see, the as technology changes, we decide to apply new technology to solve old problems
Mm.
in and there's always kind of an impedance mismatch, um, no matter what the technology it is, but they differ each time. And then I always view technology as a wheel. um, this is the new hotness, and then everybody adopts it and then misapplies it to things that it shouldn't be applied to, and then it goes out of fashion, and then it comes back around dressed in a new suit of clothes, and here we
Mm.
go rolling around again. But that understanding of why things were made to begin with, what were the problems, how they work, and then the progression. If you are absent that, then technology becomes almost like magic to you,
Mm.
and is a thing that other people make for you, not something that you are capable of making yourself.
Well, it's like mobile phones. I mean, you couldn't make. I mean, if you go back to the 19th century, and you told someone, "Oh, can you make me a telephone?" They could probably do it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing. It's wires, copper wires. It's brass and wooden boxes, and
Give me an iron
oscillators, and
core, I can wind it around, and I need a
yeah,
source of
a bit of
electricity.
wire
And
wrapped
yeah,
around. Yeah. Now, like, make me a phone, you wouldn't have the first bloody idea what to do. Well,
Yeah.
I have to grind this silicon down, and then it's just we've
Well,
lost that because it has become like magic.
yeah,
And in the minds
yeah.
of people, it's become like magic.
Yeah, and it's to the point where it's like, yeah, I wouldn't doubt it that this was kind of invented by aliens somewhere, and they brought them out of deep military bases because what the heck, I wouldn't know
A
better.
Velcro.
Yeah. So anyway, here's a list of links, just as a reminder for anyone watching this, like later on, even that we do have links in the description, and this one here, it, the electronic music site that I'm using right now, and here this is a good one. The one where Roderick Knight, who is a professor emeritus from Oberlin College, and took a great interest in Elisha Gray's work, especially the music, and he made this video for the American Musical Instrument Society in 2022. I guess they had a conference, or I think it was 2021. They had a conference, and just like everything else, it was all zoomed in. And so, back in those days,
Oh, the dark days.
yeah. And so anyway, he's really knowledgeable, and it's a pleasure to listen to him talk about that because he's really interested in it, and he shows the one that he made. And what I did is I sampled it. So we're going to hear that. Okay, so here is a demonstration of the principle of. Okay, here's a little demo of a sample I recorded of a musical telegraph that was built under the guidance of Roderick Knight and is recorded in a video demonstration that he gives. And this is what it sounds like. Here is the original pitch. Now, since this is a sample, I can basically go up and down from that. And all right, I'm going to pause it there because once again I got a little too wordy. But the thing is, that's basically roughly what it sounded like. I put a little reverb on it to make it sound like it was in a concert hall, but that's the sound of the pine box speaker, because the instrument itself also had an acoustic noise to it. With all the with the steel reeds vibrating and everything, it did tend to rattle and stuff.
Yeah.
So it had an acoustic noise, and then but the keyboardist wasn't there. He wasn't even in town. And so, you have this pine box on stage, and that's what it would have sounded like coming out of the pine box. Because Roderick Knight basically remade the whole thing and listed some people from Oberlin to help him out in doing that. And so it's like basically like copies of the instruments. And
Very evocative.
yeah. So
Well, I think it's our understanding of how do you amplify sound, right? And we already had, stringed instruments that had these, resonating cavities to amplify sound. So we just apply it to something else, and so that's what you're going to do, because you don't really have the full implementation of the musical speaker yet, right? In the way that we understand it, right? The diaphragm.
yeah, so this is definitely the video to check out, the one that ends in AMIS. He's also an ethnomusicologist, but is also what's called an organologist, someone who studies the making of musical instruments. So we are going to move on to something kind of related, because eventually that telephone was invented, and the telephone system started, growing and growing, and Elisha Gray did have a number of inventions that were a part of that, so it's not like it was all over. It's just, households will remember the phone more so than anything else. But, another thing that was important was like the telephone repeater that he invented, and that helped, a network grow.
Yeah, Wayfarer, something's up with your mic or something. You're getting like really tinny. I don't believe it's your.
Very ringy as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's
the ring modulator may not have been the thing you wanted to turn on while you were talking. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what that thing is, and the way to fix it is a restart. And,
It's fine now.
It's reverted back. It's done it a couple of times where it would cut out for like 10-15 seconds of crazy.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that I use Linux. And, and that means you got to read a lot of forums and figure stuff out. But in any
audio
case,
subsystems and that are a bit iffy sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm using Pipewire, which is also experimental.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, add StreamYards to it. All right, so anyway, the Telharmonium was invented by Thaddeus Cahill. And what this was the first telephone music providing subscription service.
Yeah, this essentially predates listening to music on the radio. This is the first time you could have, an audience and kind of a broadcast, but not necessarily.
Yeah, and so it was necessary for those concerts where Elisha Gray's instrument was used, where they could phone it in, and same thing here. And the Telharmonium was basically a building.
Yes.
And
it was a
clicking
investment.
Clicking it advances it too. I didn't know that. All right, there we go. And yeah, it was also a power generator. And it was also called the dynamo phone, or dynamo phone, I guess is a better is a better way of saying it. And so it had power generators in there, and I'm assuming by that point they were using coal. At the time of Elisha Gray, I've read on these advances over the 19th century, and there's just so many here, there, all these things that led to more and more useful generators. But at the time of Elisha Gray's invention of the musical telegraph, they were using batteries. And most of the telegraphs the early ones were all just using batteries.
Right.
Because it didn't need a large amount of electricity, and basically these chemical batteries were created that had a charge, could be used, and they had rooms full of them and stuff like that. But now this baby was capable of putting out 671,000 watts. And
that's all right.
And so that's more than a battery.
Yeah.
What's his name? Elon Musk would be pissed.
Yeah. You're going to need a few Teslas to make that work.
Because, it was combustion definitely involved in that. And so this is the picture of the engine room, and I don't think they even got the best picture they could. because you see one kind of cut off here and so forth. But basically, they were producing their own electricity, and what that would do is spin these things that were rotors. And what we see here is kind of like a schematic of, or a floor plan of rotors. Like if you see this is basically a rotor in the middle of cogs, or the cogs around the rotors. They're kind of like little wheels around the rotor and spin like wheels. And there would be 8 cogs per rotor. And those 8 cogs were capable of emitting a different frequency. And they were designed in such a way that one, or cog number 1, would be doing the fundamental, what's called the fundamental, or the pitch that you hear, the note that you hear. And then the second one would be an octave above that, which is the first harmonic overtone, which helps shape the sound. So really, these were 8 cogs that were making sine tones, and they would add together. This was the first additive synthesizer, and create different timbres by how, by basically emitting different sine tones at just the right frequencies to create a harmonic overtone series that would create a different timbre. So basically, these different frequencies, the bottom one will be the sound you hear, and then the upper ones will be coloring that sound.
Right.
And this was basically like the predecessor to the Hammond organ, because the Hammond organ had a very similar principle, except much smaller and much more efficient. But these were huge rotors with cogs that would perform the sounds. So each rotor would be like assigned to a different key on the keyboard, or maybe not a different key, or one key could access a rotor, and then the next key would access the next one available, and so forth until you reach, I guess, your polyphonic maximum. And but the 8 cogs on each rotor were there to create the timbre of the sound. So we're talking about some overkill, major overkill. And so here you see them from the side. And I guess the way it worked is the rotor would spin at a certain rate, and that would have to be just the right rate that all the teeth on the cog, the first cog, would create the frequency of the note you wanted to play. So like if you had a cog with 20 teeth on it and you wanted to play A440, that would be 22 rotations per second, I guess, of 20 teeth. Now, I don't know how fast they were able to rotate them at that point. That sounds kind of fast to me. So probably they just had more teeth. You know, the number of teeth needed to add up to how many times you could spin that per second to create that frequency.
Right, right.
Which is why it took a lot of power, because they were spinning things pretty fast. And then as you go up in frequency, you would basically, you see they even got smaller. The reason why they got smaller is because the upper harmonics are quieter than the fundamental, which is the note you hear. And so as they get smaller, they're basically putting out a lower amplitude.
Right.
Because this was before there was a voltage control amplifier, before the invention of the amplifier. It was basically the
you
powerhouse.
physically modeled the actual power of the different notes, right? Because this is electromechanical, right? These are this is also very much the basis of analog computers at that time, electromechanical systems.
Yeah. And so I'm going to play here. I'm trying to make sure we can finish before we lose our problem being here. Let's see. Okay, so here is a demonstration of the principle of the cogs on the rotors for the Telharmonium. Basically, what I have here are 8 oscillators, and you could basically think of these like 8 cogs on the rotors. The cogs would have teeth on them, kind of like the sine wave shape here. And since they're round, and maybe they'd have like however many teeth on them that they would need to execute pitches properly, And of course, the speed of the rotation affects that. Like the lowest pitch that we can hear, and it's not one that everyone can hear exactly, is 20 hertz. So you think about the fact that a lot of the musical stuff that would be played by the Telharmonium would need to have like hundreds, 200s, 300s, 400s, 500s, 600, hundreds of cycles per second, where you would need the teeth of the cog to be going by fast enough that there would be 100 of them, and or 200 or 300 or 400 of them, passing by 500, 600, 700, 800, even more. And they'd be passing by the electromagnet. So maybe if you had 20 on there, it would need to be spinning at maybe 20 times per second in order to give you a 400 hertz tone. So that's the whole general principle of that. But basically, like if you have one sine tone, you get a rather bland tone like that. Over here, we could see our oscilloscope. And I had to adjust it so that we could actually see the sine waves, because if I had like playing this note or this note here, this would be like 440 of those oscillations or little sine curves per second, and you wouldn't see that. It wouldn't fit in the display. So I had to slow it down and stuff, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about. That's a spinning cog going there. And so if you want different tones, you have to use different cogs on the rotor and have them spin faster. For example, in the harmonic overtone series, the next harmonic to change the timbre of a sound will be an octave above, and therefore it would be twice the frequency of the note below. And that's how it sounds when you add that frequency compared to. So we're adding a second spinning cog there, and that way we're getting a slightly different shape to the waveform as well. Now let's add the next harmonic overtone, which is 3 times the fundamental. Harmonic overtones are always whole numbers times the fundamental frequency, which is the note that you hear, the note being played, which right now I'm playing a D. That would be like a, pretty much middle of the road D. And we're going to add here another tone, and another, and another, and another. And by the time we get to here, this is 8 times the fundamental. So if I play like a note like A440, this one would be 8 times 440, or basically, let's see, 3,520 cycles per second. So, the higher frequency cogs would definitely need to probably have more teeth on them. Because I believe these rotors probably didn't have, they would play at one speed of the fundamental being played on the keyboard. And so all these other frequencies are basically cogs with more and more teeth going up, so that they would basically be giving you more oscillations per second. Okay. And so that's the explanation of that. It's like a really hard way of doing things, but you're inventing, and so you're creating. And here's like a mix. No, this is the keyboard controller. So it was a controller keyboard, and when you press the key, electrical impulse will go, and I guess affect the rate of spinning of a rotor. And then basically all those cogs next to them, they had electromagnets that would basically fluctuate in voltage that they produced based on how close the metal was to them. And since you had teeth on a cog, it would be close, further away, close, further away, close, further away. And that's your basic oscillation.
These things must have been going like the clappers. Like a
Yeah.
dentist drill or something.
Well, it was nuts. I'm sure because, well, here's the thing: when you're putting out that kind of power and everything, because there were no amplifiers then, they just had to drive more watts
Brute force, yeah.
in order to get it out there to the phone system. And I'm sure at that point, only the wealthier people could afford it, and it would also be pumped into hotels. Businesses would pay for it if that was helping them out, but it didn't last. It lasted just a few years.
Early
Yeah.
music.
Well, the problem was this. Well, there's a lot of problems, but the fundamental reason was because it was interfering with other telephone communications,
Oh my god.
and so people would hear like completing through in their phone calls.
Like hold
And it-
music today. That explains everything.
Except
that-
it didn't stop when you came off hold. It was while you were talking. It would
Yeah.
cross over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the other thing is so they required just the mass of all of these rotors that you're spinning are not insubstantial, and you have to have enough power to be able to quickly spin up to new speed, spin down, right, and then you need the power to send over the lines, but then you also had to have a receiver. I mean, you could just sit and listen to your telephone, but so they actually had like players that hooked up on the other end. There was this huge financial investment, and there just wasn't the uptake. And
No.
and then combined with the technical problems were the telephone, because I think didn't he end up at some point having to actually run his own wiring to certain places because the telephone the owners of the telephone wires were like, yeah, we're not having your music playing while everybody else is trying to talk or whatever. And so
Yeah.
he sunk a huge amount of money, and it was a quite the bust. It was a technical achievement. It was a financial failure.
Yep, and that's all you could say about it. Let me see if there's any more slides here. Nope, just the links to check some things out. There's one video here. Did I put Mark Doty's series in? Yeah. This is also a very good series. Mark Doty did this series on the fundamentals of electronic music. He sounds like he's a little bit stoned in it, but he actually does explain things pretty well, especially for beginners. And I don't know. I shouldn't say anything. I'm completely sober, and I probably sound stoned too. So anyway, so we go on here. Let's finish this off, baby. The first inaugural stream. We're finishing off with a Brit.
Yay.
William Dudell. And this invention was in 1899, and it's called the Singing Arc. And basically, it was based on the principle of the fact that you could use an electrical jump. When electricity jumps across nodes, the gas lamps produce light using, combustible gas, but the electric arc lamps basically use two carbon nodes where the electricity would jump across in an arc shape, and that was your light, Similar to the Edison bulb
Anode and
later.
cathode.
Yeah, and it's also the basis for early radio Morse communication with the spark gap transmitter. So like Titanic would have had a spark gap transmitter on it because they were, while noisy as hell, you could actually get some pretty good power, but it wasn't, it'll just send the signal within this band frequency on in RF. No, it's like a lightning strike going all the time. It's just this huge blast of things, but there wasn't no concern about the radio spectrum at the time.
No, yeah.
This is sounding like the Tesla coils that came.
Well, that's something that was popularized afterwards. Well, I mean, that kind of came up from like, the kind of cult following that Tesla has, and just like, okay, he's cool. And plus we've seen Frankenstein and,
Yeah, right.
and just wanting to do that. Although, I mean, a lot of the videos you find where they actually use Tesla coils, you could tell the music is actually being kind of mixed into it. It would not have sounded that clear and precise and carry all those frequencies. But anyway, so just so people know what we're talking about here. This is actually the invention itself, and it was basically, the idea was discovered when Dudell was tasked with eliminating some hums and stuff being produced by the arc lamps, because you could just literally hear it. You could hear them humming. Of course, you could still hear streetlights humming today, but it was apparently they were just like wondering, is there anything you could do about that? And he found, when working on the situation, that the power of the instrument he was using to test things basically would also generate a sound in them. And so he reasoned that this plasma of the arc-shaped jump of the electricity was actually producing the vibrations in the air, and it was. So basically, you have the vibrations of voltage current going up and down, and when it jumps in the air like that, if you do it right and you create just the right kind of plasma, you can have it carry sound as well. And I have links to like a couple demonstrations on it, and I made a little bit one myself, and it sounds like this.
Cool.
This is a sample. Okay, so here's a demonstration of a sample I made of someone's singing arc. This was, of course, made in more modern times and recorded on a cell phone or some other video recorder. And so I just kind of grabbed it and so there you go. Basically, whatever kind of like vibrations you could get in to be carried by the electrical current, you could have the arc kind of carry that out. Now, I
It
don't
was less
think
scratchy than I thought it was going to be. Because I think because you associate the arcing sound with the sound of electricity, and with the Tesla coils, which are at a much greater distance, so you have that much more bassier, scratchy sound, don't you? But I guess this arc is very, very, very short, isn't it?
Yeah, because it was like street lamp style. Did any of you guys see that? Because I know you guys are film buffs too. And probably not fans of this one though. What was it? It was the Nicolas Cage film Disney put out recently, several years ago, The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Oh, the remake, the live action.
Yeah, where the kid in it, like, basically was supposedly a genius, and he did these Tesla coils to capture, the bad sorcerers and stuff. But he at one point tried to impress a girl with his Tesla coil speakers, and it's like
I can tell you from experience that is not actually going to work. That's I mean, but I do appreciate men. We're constantly trying new and innovative ways. Most of our ideas are pretty pants, but that one, that's not going to work out for you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the examples that I have here in the links, they're pretty good. I didn't, some of these I could probably get away with playing in the stream, and definitely I'll work on making the stream a little better. Each week I'm going to try to get better and better and stuff. But I mean, some of them I just don't want to take the chance that it's copyright. And plus, at the same time, since I could take the sounds in here and just kind of like put them out my own way, it won't interfere.
Yeah.
I just thought I would be able to play it for you live and talk about while playing it last night until I discovered,
that sucks.
Yeah, I might find a workaround there. I mean, some sort of like a device that is an input device that could carry my microphone as well as stereo
Yeah.
input. And I know I have something like that lying around somewhere. Just
So
an extra
there's
interface.
there's still companies that actually sell electric arc speaker or tweeters for speakers.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm not entirely sure how good they are, but they are at least they attract the the eye of the audiophile because it's shiny and new and makes many promises. But it's such an old technology that just keeps showing up time and again, and it's an interesting comparison to the idea that we have about speakers, which is diaphragm moving air, whereas with the electric arc, you're using heat to make the air expand, right? And that's what's then transmitting the sound wave.
I wonder what the
Um,
lifespan of those would be, though.
and it depends on the material you're using for the
Mm.
for the for the anode and cathode, but and the amount of power that you're
Yeah.
pouring through it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has a cool factor to it. That's
Hmm.
basically it because people like to see things,
Yes.
Mm.
and when you have that sight and sound association together, you know,
Yeah, it's like the old
more
Marantz
intriguing.
amplifiers that had the built-in oscilloscopes in them to
Oh yeah.
to see the waveforms as they come through. But there's so many parallels to the technology that's used. So like the Telharmonium is really using the same basic electromechanical systems that would have been used in naval gun firing computers
Hmm.
that have these inputs that tell you like the roll and the pitch and the speed of the ship, and they continuously calculate the proper placement of the gun, right, and to be able to reliably hit shots at like 20 miles. Um, that electromechanical computer is really um, it is the exact same kind of technology that you were using to do the Telharmonium. So it's once a technology kind of gets established in one area, people start to figure out how we can use it in all these other different areas.
Hmm.
And sometimes things start on the musical side, and sometimes they're adopted from others. But that's always the interesting part to me about the history of technology is where people picked up a certain solution or came up with a certain solution, and then how its application spreads.
Yeah. Well, folks, I think we've had a pretty good first stream. Well, first for me, and at least the first one's the hardest.
Always, always.
So you
Yeah,
got over the first hump with the mute.
yeah.
The irony of here's
Yeah, we're gonna do something about sound. I'm not going to provide you any,
Well,
but I assure you.
that was actually a performance of John Cage's.
yes,
Well,
silence.
however long it took my wife to tell me. So anyway, I'd like you guys to, at least for anyone that watches this later or listens to it later, especially I think this will really help people get to sleep. It's about intellectual stuff on Sunday nights. I like that. Tell us anything you'd like folks to know, like especially probably, what music people can find and how can they find it.
I need to upload some more music stuff to my Ordred audio visual channel. So I'm gonna start planning that because I've got a ton of stuff sat on my hard drive that really should sort of be out there. But I need to I need to faff about with PRS, which is our musical performing rights thing. So if it goes up on YouTube, I can get my micro pennies for it.
Well, I mean, at least you do. I thought that YouTube tried to, do a waiver on the PROs, like basically by me, the artist, the author, uploading my stuff. I no longer qualify for the PRO.
Well, because I am a member of PRS, so I mean,
Uh-huh.
if I register my music with them and I put it up on YouTube, that counts. I think as a
Maybe. What I mean is like here, I said PRO just as abbreviation for a performing rights organization.
Oh
That's
yeah.
just what we call it. I'm BMI. Like here, it's pretty much ASCAP, BMI, or
Yeah.
maybe CSAC.
Yes, it's basically your is it NASCAP, is it? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah,
ASCAP.
ASCAP.
That's the one. As cat.
Well, it's actually a P at the end. It
Yeah.
is literally like if you had a cap on your
Yeah.
ass.
Yeah. So basically, it's the British version of that.
Well, look into it because, like, I think they have in their terms and conditions on YouTube that, like, me as the author, when I'm uploading this content, I'm waiving my rights to my performing rights.
Well,
you
I'll
know.
just claim because I'm not monetized, so I'll just claim it. I'll just
Well, do whatever you can. More
Yeah.
power to you. Do whatever you can. So, yeah, what I'll do is afterwards, I can leave a link to Aldred in the description,
Great.
at least by tomorrow. Yeah, it's cool stuff there for folks that are into Doctor Who. And if you're into electronic music, you're also into, well, at least the earlier Doctor Who
Well, I've done a
run.
couple of remixes of the Doctor Who theme tune. I did one in binaural as well.
Mhm.
You know, I love Delia Derbyshire. I think she was
Mhm.
such an inspiration.
Yeah, we're going to talk about her one week.
I'll be on for that.
Yeah.
I invite myself.
Oh yeah, and we got to find a way that we can communicate now.
Yeah, well, you can find me on Instagram if you have that.
Oh,
It's the only
no,
thing
that's one I did. Like in 2020, I like purged everything
Yeah,
except for Minds, and somehow I was able to just kind of reactivate Twitter, which I never did anything with anyway.
soul
But I pretty much
subject.
purged everything else. Now that it's starting to become safe to come out again, I'm slowly getting back on things.
Yeah,
But I have an email if you want to go back to the 90s.
yeah,
I'll give
yeah,
that to you afterwards.
yeah. Put it in the private chat, and I can copy paste it.
All right. All right, Jay.
Yes.
What,
I,
what might
I,
you have to say?
I've got so I'm a regular on B-roll stages, show B-sides where we watch absolutely terrible movies and then make fun of them greatly, and then we also have a lot of fun with educational and PSAs and commercials from a bygone era, and they are often hilarious. And if they're not, well, then we'll make them that way. Good.
Yeah, I keep getting the day wrong. It's Friday nights.
Yeah.
But that was I last night we did watch a bit of that. What was that movie? That was
Oh,
like,
the Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. I mean, it had Nancy Sinatra, so there's music related, you know.
yeah.
We, of course, then
Oh.
had to zot the music because copyright.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll get you every
It
time.
was
Was it?
it was a fever dream. Basil Rathbone, Boris Karloff,
Wow.
Nancy Sinatra, a cavalcade of who the hell are you and why are you in this movie and what is going on. It really was. I mean, if you're sober but wish to revisit the days of psychedelics, that movie will work. That'll.
Is it in the so bad it's good category?
Oh, it is. It is I think the only other one that we've had that was just so chaotic and why is this happening is Hell's a Poppin', which is it was actually a classic vaudeville performance that they ended up making the movie, and everything is coming at you all at once, and you're just like I'm just lean back and here comes the ride.
Well, anyway, it's good stuff. Yeah, I'll put that in the description afterwards as well. Probably going to get a bite to eat first and then do that. But anyway, here we go. Number 1 is done. Thank you for joining us, folks. Anybody that's there, thank you. My wife at Psyche Opera. Yeah, Psyche Electro-Acoustic Opera Company. That's what we called ourselves, and we're going to get back into performing again soon. But right now, it's all about the guitars. So I'll put that username in the description as well for folks to check out. All right, folks. Until next time, I don't know. What should we say? Stay fresh.
Keep the worms out of your ears. That's
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
for the best.
Keep your worms
Don't let
fresh.
Con get a hold of you.
All right, folks. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, and take